back, everyone. Today I have an amazing guest that I'm super excited for. I have the one and the only Elise Kova. How are you today?
I'm doing well, and thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Yes, that's what I like to hear. First of all, we'll get straight into it. What is it like living in Florida, USA?
It's a really interesting state. Those in the US are familiar with the lore of Florida Man. I don't know how much that has extended outside the US, but all the tales are true.
What is that?
So Florida Man is almost like an urban legend. It's not an urban legend. How do I explain it? It's basically like if you hear someone gets arrested for doing something crazy, then somewhere in the tagline, it's like a Florida man. Example, a Florida man was arrested for throwing an alligator through a drive-through window while on cocaine. That's true. I'm pretty sure it was cocaine. So like it's a weird state, but it's a wonderful state.
I want to know about your journey. I want to know where it started for you and what made you decide to write a book and publish it. How was the process?
So going back to 2012, I was living in Japan at the time, and I was hanging out with some people there, and we were talking about writing, and I had this friend who was super enthusiastic and keen on writing. And I've always loved writing. It's always been a part of my life, but it was never something like I wasn't one of those people who was like, oh, I want to be an author someday. And at that time, I was super into the Thor movie, the Marvel movie. And I wanted to write a Thor fan fiction, but I knew myself and I was like, I'm going to write 100,000 words of the fan fiction I can't ever do anything with because it's not my story. So I kept myself from writing that. And instead I began brainstorming my own story, and that was Air Awakens, and I posted it on Fiction Press between 2012 and 2013. And then I pulled it and I edited it. I queried 111 agents. They all rejected me, which is fine. All is well that ends well. I actually say it was one of the best things that could have happened to me, and I truly mean that. And then at that point, I decided that I was going to self-publish because, and this is one thing that I always like to stress, self-publishing for a lot of authors, even though I did query all of those agents, it wasn't a second choice to me. It was always something that I thought was a viable publishing path. And even when I was querying agents, I was like, I'm going to see what an agent offers me. And if I don't like the terms, then I'll self-publish or something like that. So I ended up self-publishing Air Awakens in August of 2015. In January of 2016, I went full-time as an author. And I think I'm at 23 published books now. So
Amazing. Congratulations.
thank you.
How did you find the self-publishing process? Like, what was your previous exposure to the industry? Did you know what you were doing, or did you just go, let's give it a go?
Absolutely nothing. But but I do have a business background. So my master's is in business. And so I approached it like I was starting a small business. So when I started publishing, I said, okay, I am in this to make money. That is my goal. And because I'm in this to make money, I'm going to look at it as I need to have a business plan. I need to do business industry research. I need to have a marketing plan, and I need to approach this thoughtfully. So while I didn't go in with like a ton of knowledge of the publishing industry baked into my DNA or anything like that, at that point I had queried a bunch of agents. So I had that experience. And then it was also just on my own research.
So I'm curious then, at what point, because this is a tricky thing for some indie authors, is that they don't treat it like a business initially. I think it's something initially they're like, I created this book and we'll publish it, and you stumble and you make heaps of mistakes and it's brilliant because that's the best way that you learn. And then after they keep publishing, they're like, oh, I need to make money from this. So then they realize that there kind of needs to be two hats in this position. How did you go with realizing initially that you had to have the business hat, but then you also had to have the creative side where you were producing product as well? How did you balance that?
I think for me, because it was so clear that I was in this, that I wanted to make money, I always looked at it as I am a product, I am a content provider first, and then anything else is satisfaction for me as a person after that. And that might sound a little cold or like sell out to some or whatnot, but fortunately what I like to write happens to have a market. It's not like I want to write really niche poetry or something like that. Not slamming poetry, but it's not like I'm looking to write in a super niche market that's really hard to sell in. What I like to write does have commercial legs underneath it. But I think the biggest thing that I always encourage authors who are just starting out, regardless of what publishing path you're looking at pursuing, is to really sit and be honest with yourself about what your goals are and how do you define success? Is success you have a book in the world? That's great. That is a perfectly viable definition of success. Is success you have 10 people who adore your book? Is success replacing your day job? Is it becoming the next publishing millionaire? Like, all of those are viable and everything in between them, but really make sure you kind of know what you're driving toward, because that's going to affect the actions you take.
So I'm curious, what is your take on success for you?
For me, it is I can continue writing books that I am proud of, books that I like to write, while there's a roof over my head and food in my refrigerator and enough money left over at the end of the day that I'm not panicked. That is, if I meet that threshold, anything above that is gravy, and anything below that, I have to start reevaluating some things. But that's kind of my core definition of success, because it's cool to be an author. I mean, it really is. And it's something that I love doing. And so every day that I wake up and I get to do this as my job, I'm like, all right, that's it. I've made it.
I love this. There's so many questions I have from that, because everything you're saying, it's funny because when I was looking at what questions I wanted to ask you particularly, and I was obviously stalking you online, but everything that you've said, I can very clearly see in your branding as well. So as you're saying it, I can see how specifically you've built it. And it's just amazing, because I think sometimes people know theoretically what they have to do, but they don't know how to execute it. So I guess my question to you would be then, when did you start realizing that it wasn't manageable for only one person, that you had to start building a team around you to help support this empire basically that you're building? How was that process for you?
So I think for me, it's always been know where your value add is to your business. And for me, it's, as I said, I have that business background and I have a marketing background. And so I'm savvy there. And the number one thing an author does is write new content and create content. That's your number one value add. So for me, it's things like, I do have somewhat of an art background, but I couldn't produce the covers that I have in any amount of speed. So it makes sense to outsource. When I first started publishing, I worked with basically an author services company. They're called Gatekeeper Press. And they were the ones who formatted my books and uploaded them to retailers and dealt with all of that, just because I'm trying to learn how to edit a book. I don't have time or bandwidth to figure out how to format it and get it on Amazon. So that is something that it makes sense for me where I'm at in my career to outsource it. That's something that I've since had the bandwidth to learn and do myself. But in the beginning, that was so critical. Or even things like editing, where I'm a firm believer of every book should have at least one editor. That's my personal stance on it. I usually have 3 editors, and that's not counting beta readers or last second proofreaders. And so that's another thing of, I will never replace my editors. I mean, if they decide they don't want to work with me or something anymore, then I'll have to, but I'll replace them with another editor in such an instance. So I think knowing what your core competencies are and what your value add to your business that you're making is, and really doubling down on that and being okay to let go of some of those other things. Probably my biggest shortcoming is that I've never had a PA. I respond to every email myself ever. And so it's one of those things that there have definitely been times where I'm like, I should let some of this go. So it's always a learning process for everyone.
And I guess that's exciting though, because that might be your next step, is like getting everyone, this is your chance to audition. No, I'm kidding.
Real though, you have a good resume.
Just send through the links, guys. Okay, so I read your work for the first time, and I'm not gonna lie, I have seen your covers numerous times, and I'm like, I really need to read her work. And because they're gorgeous, they're absolutely beautiful covers. And so your new one came out, Deal with an Elf King, and I was like, if I must. Oh my goodness, there it is. Yeah, so that one I read and I absolutely loved it. And so that was my entry level into your world. And I knew I would love you. Verified, I love you. Thank you for writing amazing books. Stop, the heart, the feels. I want to talk a little bit about that series and what's coming up for it, because I know there's a second one, which I'm excited for. So tell me a little bit about your inspiration behind that series.
Yeah. For A Deal with an Elf King, it was the first book I wrote in quarantine. So I was coming off the heels of Air Awakens Vortex Chronicles, which is this really big, epic adventure, sweeping fantasy across time and place and all of that. And so I had this meaty series that just ground me to the bone. I'm not gonna lie. I was at that point where I had been releasing 3 to 4 books a year. It was an unsustainable pace. My worlds were becoming bigger and more complex. And I was like right at that edge of burnout. And so as soon as I was finished drafting the final book of Vortex Chronicles, which was December of 2019, I said, I'm going to take 3 months off. I air quote off because I was still responding to emails. I was still editing at that time. I was still marketing my next release and all of that, but I wasn't writing. I took a writing break for 3 months. And when I came back, right about the time that I had planned that, okay, I'm going to come back to writing, was when the lockdown started. And so I had plans that were canceled, as everyone pretty much at that point had, plans that were canceled. Suddenly you're shut in. You don't really know what's going on at that time. And I'm like, I just want to write something that makes me happy. I want to write an escape. I want to write about a young woman who's pulled into a world and has no control over her circumstances, but there's a happily ever after at the end of it all. And so, and the other big driver was I want to write a story that is standalone. So everything is wrapped up in one story. Here's your little bow at the end, feel good present. And with that, my other inspirations were Hades and Persephone and Beauty and the Beast, familiar, feel-good kind of energies. And A Deal with the Elf King was born from that. And it was sort of my, I don't really know if this is going to sell, but I don't really care kind of book. I've been really fortunate that people loved it. And as far as what's next in the world, my plan is that I'm going to release. It's a little frustrating because on Amazon and retailers, you have to bundle things as a series, but each book is a standalone. So it's a shared world where a different young woman is taken to the land of Midscape by a magical, handsome man and ends up married or engaged to him. That is it. That is what you're getting from this world.
No, that sounds terrible. Can't wait for that to come out. That's such a tease. You just like drop mic, walk out. Wow. Okay, so I do have a question because I absolutely loved this book, and so I am intrigued to read your series now as well. I do have what you were saying, how, writing long series. And when you were saying this, I could relate a little because I am in book 5 of one of my series, and I've always done trilogies. And it's exhausting because I'm like, what is it? Whose intentions is this and that? And you have so many characters and it gets very complex. And so, especially when you're doing fantasy, how do you reassure that you are sticking by your rules in your fantasy worlds when you're building such, especially do you have a particular routine to make sure that you're keeping in check, or I don't know, your face scares me a little because you're like, no, maybe.
I'm cringing because I'm like, my process is not a great process. I am self-aware.
I was gonna say, your expression threw me off, and I was like, she's either has some like magical like ray of this is how you do it and it'll be perfect, or you're just like, no idea. I just kind of write bits and pieces. There's tabs here, maybe sometimes here, and then I search through other manuscripts to find this.
I pray to all the old gods that I haven't lost a sticky note somewhere along the line. No, I try to keep organized. I am not the best at doing it. But I work in Scrivener, is my current software of choice for drafting. And I do have, what I do is each version of a manuscript has their own folder, and then chapters their own individual documents. And then that way a single Scrivener file contains a whole world. And so I have like my book Bible for that world that I can expand on and refer to. I cringe because what I should be doing is updating that book Bible as I write. And I don't always do that. Like there was a character in Air Awakens Vortex Chronicles, which happens in the same world as Air Awakens, who's only mentioned once, I think, in Air Awakens, and is only mentioned once in Vortex. And I could have sworn I didn't name this character in Air Awakens, but I did, and their name changed. And some reader was like, why do they have a different name? And I'm like, they don't, as of the new file update. So there you go. If any of my readers are watching this, if you have one of the early physical copies of Vortex Chronicles, somewhere in those 5 books is a name continuity error. I mean, they slipped through.
Limited edition.
Limited edition, yes. So they slip through. I think it's natural. I think my big thing is I try as much as possible to keep it straight. I try as much as possible to make notes as I'm writing of things that I change, or if I'm drafting and I change something, I'll have a to edit file that I have open, because I'm a flow drafter where I draft the entire thing and then edit the entire thing. I don't edit as I go. And so I'll keep a list of, these are the things that I have to edit when I go back and edit. So I do that as I'm drafting. But otherwise, I mean, good beta readers, good alpha readers, good people with attention to detail, when you're cross-eyed because you've stared at this manuscript for 7 years, it feels like.
One thing I'm super, super excited about is you lived in Japan for a while. I cannot tell you how jealous I am of you, and I find that so amazing because that is a place that I've wanted to go for years. And you also are a gamer and you love anime and manga. And I was like, hello, soul sister, what up? So my
return to the heart.
I know, I was like, stop at the fields. What I want to know what it was like for you living in Japan, but also an interesting question I have is, do you feel like your love for games and for anime and for manga ever gave you, like maybe as a teenager or a young child, inspiration for the fantasy worlds that you build today?
Oh yeah. I mean, so answering that, because I feel like it'll be a shorter answer first. I definitely think anime and manga and all of that definitely really inspired me, still inspires me. I think there's very different types of stories you see in anime than you see in really any other medium, which has always fascinated me. I feel like there are stories that go places that you just don't see in live action TV shows or movies or whatever else, for a multitude of reasons. So for sure. And I grew up with the Record of Lodoss War, which, for anyone who doesn't know, is an old school anime based off of a dude's Dungeons and Dragons campaign. It's amazing. Go check. I mean, it probably hasn't aged well now that I think about it, but there were definitely anime that I can still think back to and think of that was really formative for me, both as a storyteller and as a fantasy lover. As far as living in Japan, it was super incredible. Highly recommend, if people are able, and we were talking before this started about you living abroad. So I feel like you'll definitely get this, but I highly recommend to people, if you are fortunate enough to find a way to do it, to live outside of your native country, at least for a little bit of time. Because I think especially for Americans too, not to generalize Americans, I just feel like we don't get to travel maybe as much as some of the other corners of the world do. But living in Japan gave me such perspective on my own country and my own corner of the world by going somewhere else. And it was so different and so wonderful, and I highly recommend it, and definitely encourage everyone to travel to Japan whenever you're able.
Yes, that it's the first place I plan on going after this interview, actually. So no, I'm kidding. After COVID, it's the first place I plan on going. So I'm so excited.
Just let me know when. I might show up, not to be creepy or anything.
That's not creepy. I'll send you an invite afterwards. I'll be like, I've already planned our, what are they? Oh, I've already planned our Kentucky tour. Like, let's just drink the whole way. No, I'm kidding. Or am I? One thing that I found so fascinating about when I was stalking you, in my time of stalking you, was I came across your website, and I'm going to sound super Aussie, but bloody beautiful. And so the one thing that I found so fascinating about was the amount of information that you have on your website. And I was like, damn, I really have to up my game, because like this website is unreal. Like, for those who are watching it, they've probably already checked it out. If you haven't, do check it out. And you also answer a lot of the questions that, you know, we would have had in this interview, or how you came about writing, what your process is like, who your cover artists are. And I just found that so, because I stalk them too, because I love your cover art. So I was like, I want to check out what else they've done. But it was so on point. And so it made sense to me when you're saying that you have a background in business and marketing, because I'm like, this is the material that readers want. This helps readers understand who you are. And I also signed up to your newsletter, and I'm loving all the I've got, like, on it, I can genuinely say, like, I get a lot of newsletters. I can genuinely say yours really, like, I'm excited to open yours, because it, as you said, like, it's content, it's value. I get something from it every time, and that's something I very rarely get from many of the subscriptions I have, let's say. So, and another thing that I did notice was that you also offer your services to mentor and to speak. And I was just wondering, why is it so important to you to give back to the author community?
I don't do nearly enough. You make me sound like way more amazing than I am, which thank you. But no, for me, I think the big thing is it's twofold. One, as we kind of talked about earlier, I didn't get here by myself. I had people who helped me along the way. I had people who, when I was just like, hey, I'm a lady with a book, you want to talk to me? Who said yes. And so everyone starts out somewhere. And I think I truly believe that a rising tide lifts all boats. And it is the obligation of people who are further along to help people come with you on that journey if they want to. And I firmly disagree with the notion of authors as competition. I think authors as competition only exists in a world where readers only read 1 or 2 books a year, which I would be shocked to find that person, because none of my readers only read 1 or 2 books a year. So I want to be of service as much as I, as an individual, am able. And two, my other kind of component is, I recognize that I came into this from a place of privilege and from a place of good fortune. I had a good job when I started publishing. And because of that, I had seed money that I could funnel into my business while still paying my rent and still buying food. Maybe money was a little bit tight at that point, but I wasn't worried about, am I going to get evicted from my house because I'm taking a chance on this publishing thing? And not everyone has the same starting line. And so as much as I am able to help someone get further down the process faster, because I do come from a place of fortune, I want to help and do that.
Completely agree. I shouldn't say you have a great attitude, but you do, because like it's always refreshing and amazing to hear. And I love interviewing authors such as yourself who really do take the time to give back, because they're very humble in the sand. You quite honestly are successful. You've done very, very well in your journey and how far you've come. And I find it so amazingly inspiring and humbling, the fact that you remember where you came from, where you started, and you're happy to help people along the way, because that's all we need. Like, we all remember at some point somebody giving us a tip or helping us in some way, and it's helped us profoundly. So I love that you're that person for somebody else now. It's amazing.
And I hate that I can't do more. Like, honestly, there are days where I'm just like, I am one person and I don't know how I can do more and I want to, but I'm always trying to find ways that I can. And that's part of why I've tried to build up my website, where it is look, I may not always be able to answer every email or every Instagram message, but I'm going to try and put as many things as I can on my site so that way people know, oh, I can go here and get this information.
One thing I really want to talk about is you are a USA bestseller. And also, and one thing we did forget to mention, you're with an Elf King, #1 in 10 categories on Amazon. Just before our interview we had, you were #1 in 2 and #2, and I think you're like 258 on all of Amazon.com. That's amazing. That's so amazing. You are also a USA bestseller, and I want to know what book/books that was for, and what was the moment when you realized you'd hit that list? And of course, what did you do to celebrate?
So that book was Crystal Crowned, which was the 5th book in my debut series, Air Awakens, which came out in, I want to say it was July of 16. It was June or July, one of the J months, but not January. And really what had happened, because it was my debut series and because I just got really lucky in part with that one, I had no bearing to know if my sales were good. Like, I was 3 or 4 books in and I was talking with an author friend, and one thing I love about the indie author community is a lot of authors are willing to be candid with their numbers if you kind of approach them in a genuine way and have a reason other than just like, how much money do you make? But like more of a let's talk shop. And so I had mentioned what my sales were, and they were like, why haven't you hit a list yet? And I was like, oh, I don't know. Is that a thing? Am I in that ballpark? Should I think about that? So I found the email of the editor or one of the people that worked at USA Today. And I was like, do I have to do anything? And they were like, no, you don't. And I was like, okay, cool. Well, I'll just hang out. And so 4th book came out and nothing. And then the 5th book, it was number 89 on the list, and for all of 1 week. But yeah, it hit number 89 on the list, and now I'm like, all right, I can tattoo that onto my forehead, check it off my bucket list, and that's done.
What did you do to celebrate?
I should have an answer for that. I probably went out to dinner. I'm really boring.
I didn't be bored. I think you're cool. You're cool in my books. You're cool, kid. What's been your most memorable reader interaction?
So it's a toss-up. It's a toss-up either between the young woman who was my first cosplayer of one of my characters who had a signing, came in costume. So it was either that, or I was at a convention and I was there with my books, and I had the man was with me, and he was just he comes sometimes if they're local to help just get inventory and process payments and all of that. And this younger kid walks up and he's like, oh, hey, I've read these books. And it was my Loom Saga. And he was like, oh, I need to get the last one. And we're like, okay, well, here, it's cost us much, and sold it. And as as we're finishing the transaction, I'm like, do you want me to sign it? And he was like, oh, yeah, okay, I guess. And I'm like, okay, sure, no pressure. Like, I sign it, and he walks away. And about 10 minutes later, he comes back and he goes, holding the book, are you the author? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, I thought it was weird when you offered to sign my book, but then I realized what you signed was the same name as the book. And he was like, I love this series so much. And I'm just like, I have melted. I no longer exist. Farewell, world. This was too sweet. Goodbye. So probably one of those two.
Oh, that's adorable. One thing we have to address is your book covers. They are absolutely stunning. And what I love is that you have used different cover artists for different series because, as I said, I had stalked them. And so I'm curious as to why you chose to go with different artists each time. Is it more so you just like the idea of giving everyone like, I don't know, an opportunity, or you want to change them slightly? What was the reasoning behind that?
A little bit of both. I like the idea of working with new people, because I think when you meet people and you work with new people, you get kind of that injection of creativity yourself, of they're gonna bring a different artistic eye than anyone else. And that's why you want to work with artists, is because of that artistic eye. And so a little bit of that, but then also, again, that marketing side of my brain. I wanted all of my covers to look as though they have a cohesive brand between them, but not be so identical that people couldn't necessarily tell series apart. So part of my goal was of having a cover artist for every series was to make it clear this style is this series, but they all kind of umbrella into what sort of my brand, my covers look like.
What advice would you offer for fellow authors when engaging with a cover artist, when they're getting a custom cover? Because I know it can be a little bit shaky for some people because they don't know what to expect. And one of the advice I always say is remember that it is a business relationship. And if you feel like something, you need to be very transparent and you need to be very, very open, but you also need to know what you want. If you're going in for a custom design, you need to know the key elements that you're after. You can't just expect them to make something out of nothing. So what would your top tip be for somebody who wants to get a custom piece done?
I have like 3 or 4 things, so I'm sorry, it's not
No,
one
no,
tip.
yes.
I always say that the 3 people who are worth their weight in gold to me as an author is a good editor, a good accountant, and a good lawyer. And one of the things that I strongly encourage anyone who's getting any cover done, and really just as an author, you should understand some baselines of intellectual property and copyright law. I am not a lawyer, just obvious disclaimer is obvious here. But I've talked to many lawyers because I had questions and I wanted their expertise. So that is one thing when you go to talk with a cover artist, you should know, are you getting a license or are you having a work for hire full copyright agreement? Those are 2 very different things, and you should understand the pros and cons in each of them, which is a whole nother 40 minutes we could talk about. So that is, I would say, the number 1 thing. The number 2 thing that's kind of tangentially related to that is have a contract in place, ideally a contract that is vetted by or written by a lawyer. And I am a big proponent in having contracts with all of my business partners and people I work with. I think not because I want to be litigious with anybody or anything like that. I think it protects all parties. And that's something that a lot of people, you go in expecting everything to be wonderful, and hopefully it is. And hopefully you never have to use the get out clauses that you put in a contract. But if you have a contract in place, it is almost always less messy to get out than if you don't have a contract in place. So know what you want as far as rights, have a contract in place. Everything you said so far as, don't go in and just be like, hi, make me pretty book cover. Go. There was a reason why you approached them, this artist is presumably, start there of, I really liked this artwork in your portfolio, or I'm thinking something of this meets that. Also too, look at an artist portfolio and don't go to an artist. If I'm going to go back to an anime reference, if an artist has a style of Studio Ghibli, don't go to them and expect Makoto Shinkai, and vice versa. Every artist has their own style, and yes, they can adapt, but you're going to them because of that expertise. And then the last thing that I could add to that is, in many cases, you get for what you pay for. And if something seems, unfortunately, there are scammers out there, and if something seems too good to be true, it might be. So if you're looking for full copyright of a full illustration that is by a professional who knows what they're doing, that doesn't come cheap. And it shouldn't, because these artists should be paid what they are worth. But don't go in trying to lowball them or negotiate them down or anything like that. Pay them what they're worth, and they're going to do right by you most of the time. Almost all of the time.
What would you say your greatest challenge and your greatest accomplishment to date has been?
So I think my greatest challenge was how to phrase this. So I had a lot of good fortune with Air Awakens. And then my next series, The Loom Saga, for all I love it and for all I think it still has some of my best writing, though as I progress as an author, that's kind of becoming less and less. It didn't do well. Like it didn't meet the benchmarks that it had hoped to meet by me, by the publisher, and all of that. And that's hard. And it can be a bit gutting when you see a book that you're like, yeah, bookstores aren't going to shelf it anymore because it's not selling well enough for them to shelf it. And so I think, and you have a year where you go in the red instead of in the black. And that's one thing that I do say to a lot of authors is this career, there's nothing certain. And if you are having a really good year or a really good couple years, keep the momentum going. Thank your lucky stars. Save it. Be smart with it because there is no guarantees in this industry. So I think learning that and learning those lessons was probably one of my greater challenges. And then probably my greatest accomplishment, I would say, was actually January of this year, so last month, 2021, because I haven't checked if this is true or not, but when I was in school, there was the statistic of over 50% or 80%, some high number percent of small businesses fail in the first 5 years. They shutter. And so I always kind of had that in my mind of if I can sustain for 5 years, then it bodes really well that I can do this. And so I just hit that mark and I'm like, okay, I can't let up now, but I did it. So that was my little, okay, moment.
Quite interesting too that. So are you a hybrid author? Are you now traditionally published as well?
So I am by technical definition hybrid because I do have a series that's with a publisher, my Loom Saga, which was my second series to come out. It came out in 2017. And so I am by definition hybrid, but all of my other books have been indie. So I am represented by an agent, at a literary agent. I have been on submission with other publishers before. And so it's a model that I like, that hybrid life. And it is one thing that, going back to something I said at the beginning, being independently published or self-published is not a second choice in many cases. It is a business decision from the get-go.
It's very one thing too I like to point out is like a lot of traditional authors have gone in the last like 5 to 10 years. They have gone indie as well because financially they get more money from it. So it's a bit of, which side you want to go. Currently, I'm indie. I would like to try both just because I do feel like, the traditional market is there for a reason. It's been building there for hundreds of years, and there are places that they can go with a team, an experienced team, a lot quicker. But then also there is the luxury and freedom of being an indie author and being in control of everything. And there's something always fun about creating your own opportunities as well. So, so that's amazing too, though. Congratulations on your contract.
Thank you. And I hope you will never hear me disparaging one publishing path or the other, because there are pros and cons to each. They don't always make sense for every author, and everyone is individual. So the people who are like indie or bust or trad or bust, I'm like, both have pros and cons.
What does your day-to-day look like? What is your magical routine?
Not really magical. I start every day with a cup of tea. So the man and I, we drink our tea and coffee. Usually finish my first cup, second cup, head upstairs to work. Usually about the first hour to hour and a half of my days I spend on ads, and tracking them, managing them, making any adjustments I need to. And that's something I pretty much do every day of the week. On weekends, I usually only do 20 minutes because it's just to pull data and put them in my spreadsheets and then move along. I try not to work on the weekends just for mental health and work-life balance. So start with ads. Then I usually have anywhere between 1 to 3 hours of emails. and I air quote emails because that's sort of all encompassing of what's going on social media. Did someone message me that I need to respond to? Did I get an email from Ingram Spark, which is my print on demand service, and I need to upload a revised file, which means I have to now open up Photoshop or InDesign to make that adjustment. So that takes me pretty much up to lunch usually. And then after lunch, from about 1 p.m. to usually around 3:30, I get some good writing time in. Then I take a break for snack time because I'm still 4 inside. And then maybe a glass of wine with it. Then I'll come back and I'll usually write for another 1 to 2 hours. And then if I'm in crunch mode, I might work late into the evening. There is actually a day bed in my office for the times that I am working that late.
Okay, so this goes on to my next question, which is, what are your top 3 marketing tips? Now, you did just mention ads before, and I'm super excited that you do your own ads, because then that means I can ask you questions on it. What is your focus on ads? Are you AMS? Are you Facebook? Are you Google? Like, where are you focusing and why?
So my predominant focus is AMS. The why is quite simple. I have figured out how to make it work for me. And I think the thing is that, and I was having this conversation just the other day with an author friend of mine, where there's no secret sauce. If there was a secret sauce, it would be bottled and sold and everyone would be buying. And the truth of the matter is that there are tactics and strategies that are good to understand why those tactics and strategies work, but then you have to apply them to your books. Every book is different. There are books that I can make sell with what I feel like is a good ROI through AMS ads that I can't make run on Facebook. And there are books that I can sell on Facebook that I can't make work on AMS. So I think it's, while the predominant lion's share of my focus is AMS, just because I feel like I've wrapped my head around it, I don't want to ever come off as saying like, this is the thing that will make it work for you. Because at the same time as I'm like, all right, I got it, guys, I got AMS, I'll have friends who will be like, really? Because I can't make AMS work, but I'm crushing it on Facebook. And I'm like, that is a totally different language to me. I don't know how to speak it. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now with them.
Amazing. So what would you say just in general, your 3 top marketing tips would be?
3 top marketing tips, I would say, have a newsletter and understand what you're doing with that newsletter. You can always change, you can always evolve, you can always add or take away, but at least have a point of view of, is this newsletter just to send out notifications? Are you having a weekly touch-in? Are you talking about your personal life, or is it book only? But have a newsletter. And the reason being is because, at least last I've heard from data, email still converts the highest out of everything. The other powerful thing about newsletters is you own the contact with those people, as long as they want to be contacted by you, of course. But if my Facebook got shut off, if my Instagram got shut off, I would still have my email list. So I do still think that the newsletter is king in a marketing strategy when wielded correctly. The next thing that I would say as far as a marketing tip is understand your sales funnel, especially as you get further into this industry. When you're just starting out and you have one book, your sales funnel is, this is my book, please buy it. And when you have 2 books, your sales funnel is, this is my first book, please buy it, and then buy the second one. But as you get further into the industry, understanding how you want people to sort of flow through your books, what the entry points are, is really critical. And even if you just have one book, how are you focusing on getting potential customers? Where is your customer acquisition taking place? Is it on Facebook? Is it through advertising? How is that happening? And how are you getting them from, hi, nice to meet you, to buy my book, to follow me as an author? And how are you driving people to that end goal? So newsletter, sales funnel. And then the last marketing tip that I would have is kind of what we've already talked about, is understand your place in the market and your brand and what it is that when people think of your name here, what is it that comes to mind? What are the elements that comes to mind? What are they envisioning? Because that is another key thing that's going to really help sort of narrow you in when there's so much that you can do, really narrow your focus.
Those are great tips.
Thank you.
This is always a hard one. What has been your favorite book to write and why?
Okay, this was great. Thank you so much.
Have a good life. It was lovely meeting you.
Yeah, no, this was fun. Enjoyed time in Japan without me. No, I'm just okay, favorite book to write and why. I will always have a soft spot for Air Awakens. It was the first book I wrote. It was my debut. Even though I look back on it now and cringe, and I'll have people say, "Oh my God, I love this book so much." And I'm like, why? Even though I have that energy a bit toward it now, I will always have a soft spot in my heart for that book. And then probably my next release, which I brought props, A Trial of Sorcerers.
I'm excited about this book.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm super excited about it. But I think what I loved about writing Trial is I almost felt like, I don't know how to say this that doesn't kind of sound bad, but almost like an Air Awakens redo of like, if I could fix some of the mistakes that I made in this book and do them better. There was a little bit of that energy when I was writing it. And so I really am in love with it right now. But if you had asked me a couple months ago, I would have said Elf King. And I always think, the best part about this industry and this job is that your best book should always be your next book, because you're always learning, you're always growing, you're always improving.
And one thing I want to mention too is how beautiful the hardbacks are. And also you do drops. So I noticed that you have an Etsy store, and then you will let your readers know that you have signed X amount limited editions. You sign them and you post them off. And I think that's amazing.
Yeah, I want to keep them in stock full time, but I am a one-woman show. Like I spent this past Sunday, bless the man and his patience for me and my career, on Valentine's Day. We spent 4 hours packaging 70 Etsy orders together. So I do wish I could put more out there, but I do the drops just because it helps me manage time a little bit better, because it kind of bulks everything together. But yeah, it's something I started the past 6 months, and it's fantastic to be able to connect with readers in a new way.
So another thing I'm also getting from this conversation is you need a PA. So if anyone would like to, so that you can have those 4 hours of Valentine's Day with the man. What is for you? What is your goal? What is the dream that you're chasing for your career?
Going back to what I said earlier, I just want to do this for the rest of my life. If I can do this for the rest of my life and keep a roof over my head, I've made it at that point, and I've continued to make it. I mean, if I had to pick something aspirational, New York Times bestseller would be pretty nice. But what author doesn't say that?
Have you ever envisioned perhaps, I don't know, like a Netflix TV series or maybe a movie series?
I have, but really I have different mediums for different series. So I would love to see, for example, I think Air Awakens would do really well as a Netflix series. I think Loom would do really well as an HBO series, or even an anime by Studio Madhouse. Not like I've planned what studios should work on it or anything like that. Like, I wouldn't do that. Wow. But that would be super cool. I mean, it's a little scary too, because you don't have control at that point. You have signed away the rights and can just hope that it turns out good. But it would be it would be super cool to see, for sure.
So tell us what is coming out. What should we be looking at from you? So we obviously know Trials is coming out. 3 days, I believe it is, which is so exciting. I'm going to grab my copy. I'm super excited. What else do we need to know about what's coming out this year? Where do we find you?
So I try, as you have Aptly put. I try and keep my website updated. That's always the best place to find information about me, links to buy my books, everything. And that's just Elise Kova, my name, ELISEKOVA.com. And so as far as what I know I'm going to be releasing this year, I'm definitely going to be releasing A Trial of Sorcerers. That's March 4th, 2021. I am also going to be releasing the next book in my Married to Magic universe, which is, it's currently titled A Dance with the Fey Rogue, but I might, for the first time in my career, change a title. I don't know yet. But so if that changes, that's why it might be a different title. That is for sure coming out this year. I don't know if it's coming out summer or fall. And a lot of that just depends on how drafting wraps up and editorial goes and all of that, because I wrote Elf King from a place of like pure passion of, I really want to write this book. I'm really excited to write it. And I want to keep that energy throughout the series. So I don't want to rush it.
You and I have a new segment that's called Speed Dating with an Author. So you and I are going to go on a romantic little date. I have lit a candle for us.
I have the wine.
You've been hiding that this whole time. Right, there we are. My goodness. Here I am drinking my green tea and you're on the wine. I feel so... No, I shouldn't.
Well, again, for the record, like I know we established I'm in Florida, but it is after 6 when we started this. It is not like right first thing in the morning where I'm like, a something to wake up to.
Gonna get those words in today. The worst one is just like, should I pour a glass of wine? And then I looked at the time, I was like, oh, it's only 10 a.m. Maybe not. That'll be bad for me.
That's what mimosas were made for.
Oh, I wish I had juice.
You could just have a juiceless mimosa.
I fear when we go to Japan together, this is going to be messy. It's just going to be like, they've been drinking a lot of juice on that trip. Every photo is with some juice. So, on our date we go. What's one of the clumsiest moments you've ever had?
So it's probably bad form to talk about someone else when you're on a date, but the man, when I didn't even meet him. Like when I first kind of saw him, that sounds so bad. I'm such a creeper. It was back when I was still working in an office and we happened to work at the same place. And I was at the water cooler. I promise all of this is true. I know this sounds super cliche. I was at the water cooler and I'm filling up my water tumbler thing because I'm a fish. And I'm filling it up and he walks in and he's talking with someone. He doesn't even like look my way. And it was like one of those moments where I was like, huh? And like time stops. And then I just feel water running over my hand and the cup has overflowed and it's spilling on the floor. And of course I jump and the water goes like all over me and just puddles. He doesn't notice. He just keeps walking. Like, and so then I'm like trying to mop it up and like people emerge from offices and are like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm fine. This is fine. So yeah.
It's the start of a great romance. Like, this is a movie right here. As you're like, and he didn't even notice me though. But then, then they're going to be like, why is she wet? Like, what happened?
I'm pretty glad he didn't notice me at that point. Because when we actually had an introduction, I was like, yeah, we passed by each other. You don't remember? Great. That is actually fantastic.
And they fell madly in love, and now he laughs at her after she told him this story. I'm assuming.
Basically.
If you had to describe yourself in 3 words, what would they be?
Driven, probably. Creative, and either kind or authentic, but I hope someone would describe me as that. Like, it feels weird to be like, I am so kind. Because again, I always feel like I could do more and do better, but I strive to it. So aspire. There we go. That's the word.
What song best describes you?
There is an Owl City song called The Real World. And the chorus is, reality is a lovely place, but I wouldn't want to live there. And that has always just spoken to my soul.
What is your life motto?
Carpe diem.
What is
which
it?
Means Carpe diem. It's Latin and it means seize the day.
Oh, I love that. And my last question is, I feel like I know the answer. What is a unique skill set or talent that you have?
You probably do know the answer. I love baking bread. I have a sourdough starter that's about 5-ish years old now. Her name is Pan. I named my starter. I am that woman. But she and I have baked many a loaf together.
I love Pan. I love that she brings you so much joy.
Okay, but like, so one of the first times I went and stayed at the man's parents' house. I'm sorry to have like so many anecdotes, but like our place was getting fumigated. And so we had to leave and we had to take everything with us. And so I show up and I'm like, hi, here's my cooler with my sourdough starter. Do you have space in the fridge or else she'll die? I am the woman your son has chosen.
I can bake bread.
Date. I still have wine.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah, you didn't even. I'm surprised you didn't drink your wine. Like you're just like, wow, this date's terrible. Look, I'm not gonna lie.
I trust myself to not spill it on myself. Going back.
I don't know. Why do you think I have like 2 hands at all times? Or you just see me in a video like dribbling tea down myself. Look, Elise, I'm gonna be honest with you. I absolutely love you as a person. I don't know if I would go on a second date necessarily because I just feel like, there's a mention of your man and there's a mention of your bread maker. And I just don't know if there's room for me in your life. And I feel like you're going to be the one that I always let go,
That's fair. That's fair. I mean, it was really my faux pas. I really shouldn't have brought up the man on a date. Probably.
You don't think the bread maker's the...
But hey, maybe we can just strictly platonically go to Japan someday.
That I'm okay with. You know what? Maybe we could be a friends basis.
There we go. I like that. Catch dinner sometimes, send an email or two.
My goodness. This works out perfectly. I have had an absolute blast in this interview. Thank you so much for joining me today.
It has been wonderful. Thank you for having me. This was so much fun.
I am going to love you and leave you. So have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.